Welcome to Phoenix Podcast, hosted by Amin Moghinian, where we deep dive into economics and politics.
Sounds good.
And today we're diving into the fascinating world of China's global ambitions.
All right.
So we've all seen China's, economic rise over the past few decades.
Right.
But now they're taking a more prominent role on the world stage.
Mm-hmm.
And the big question is, how is this impacting the rest of the world, especially developing nations?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's no easy answer.
Right.
Some people view China's involvement as a positive force,
Okay.
bringing much-needed investment and development to these countries.
Mm-hmm.
But others worry about the potential risks, arguing that China might be using its economic power to gain geopolitical leverage,
Okay.
maybe even at the expense of these nations' long-term interests.
Okay, that's pretty intriguing. So where do we even begin to unpack this?
Well, one way to understand China's approach is to look at some specific examples of their global activities.
Okay.
Let's start with the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka.
Okay, I've heard of that. What happened there?
So Sri Lanka wanted to build a second port, a massive project,
Right.
but they didn't have the funds, so China stepped in and offered a loan of $1.3 billion.
Wow.
At first glance, it seemed like a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Sri Lanka gets its port, and China gets a foothold in a strategically important location.
Yeah, it sounds like a win-win on the surface, but I have a feeling there's more to the story.
You're right, there's a catch.
Okay.
The port didn't perform as well as expected,
Oh.
and Sri Lanka started struggling to repay the loan.
Uh-oh.
This is where the debt trap theory comes into play.
Okay.
Some analysts believe China may have intentionally offered this loan knowing that Sri Lanka might struggle to repay it,
Okay.
with the ultimate goal of gaining control of the port.
Wait, so they basically loaned money knowing it might not be paid back?
Right.
Just to seize a strategic asset that sounds almost like a modern-day colonialism.
That's a strong comparison, and it's a point of serious debate. It raises a lot of questions about China's motives. Are they genuinely interested in helping developing nations? Or is there a more calculated strategic game at play?
Right.
Imagine if this model was replicated around the world.
Yeah.
It could shift the balance of global power dramatically.
Yeah. That's a sobering thought. And it makes me wonder if the Hambantota port is an isolated incident, or is this part of a bigger pattern?
Well, the Hambantota port is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Okay.
To understand the scope of China's ambitions, we need to zoom out and look at their massive Belt and Road initiative.
Ah, yes, the Belt and Road. I know it involved tons of infrastructure projects across continents.
Right.
But can you remind me of the specifics?
Think of it as a modern-day Silk Road,
Okay.
but on a scale that's almost hard to comprehend.
Wow.
It's a vast network of roads, railways, ports, pipelines, all connecting Asia, Africa, and Europe.
That's a lot.
One of the most prominent examples is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC for short.
Okay, CPEC.
Imagine a network of highways, power plants, and railways spanning the entire length of Pakistan.
I remember reading about the Karakoram Highway that's part of CPEC, right?
It is.
It cuts through the Himalayas and is considered the highest paved international road in the world.
It is.
Just the engineering feat alone is mind-blowing.
It really is.
Yeah.
And for Pakistan, this investment in infrastructure is bringing much-needed development and economic growth.
That's good.
But as with the Hambantota port, there are concerns.
Such as, I'm guessing those concerns have something to do with the debt-trapped idea we talked about earlier.
You're patching on quickly.
Okay.
Some experts worry that Pakistan might struggle to manage the massive debt associated with these projects,
Right.
and that this could ultimately give China an unhealthy amount of influence over their economy and even their political decisions.
So while these projects might seem beneficial on the surface,
Yeah.
there's a potential downside that could leave these countries in a vulnerable position.
Yeah.
That's a theme we're seeing play out here.
Exactly. It's crucial to look at both the potential benefits and risks of these projects.
Right.
Economic growth is essential, but not at the cost of a country's sovereignty or long-term economic stability.
Right.
And it's a debate that's happening not just in Asia, but all over the world, including Africa, where China's presence is growing rapidly.
Okay, let's shift gears then and talk about Africa. I know China has invested in a wide range of projects across the continent.
Mm-hmm.
What's the situation there?
It's a very diverse picture.
Okay.
They're investing in everything from infrastructure to mining to agriculture.
Wow.
But let's focus on one specific example, the Kenya-Nairobi-Mombasa railway line.
I read something about that, a big project connecting the capital with a major port, right?
Yes, and it's a fascinating case study.
Okay.
The railway line, built by a Chinese company and financed by a Chinese bank,
Okay.
significantly reduced travel time between Nairobi and Mombasa.
Right.
On the surface, it seems like a positive development,
Yeah.
but there's more to it.
I have a feeling you're about to tell me about Another potential downside?
You're right.
Okay.
It turns out that Kenya put up the Mombasa port, their most important port, as collateral for the loan. If
Oh,
they can't repay the loan, China could potentially take control of the port.
wow. So they essentially put their most valuable asset on the line for this railway. It seems risky.
It highlights the potential pitfalls of these deals, even when they appear to offer significant benefits.
Yeah,
These agreements need to be carefully scrutinized to ensure they are in the best long-term interests of the countries involved.
right.
And it raises another important question. Are all of China's activities in Africa framed as development initiative?
That's a great question. I know there's been a lot of talk about China's involvement in resource extraction in Africa.
Uh-huh.
Is that always a positive thing?
Unfortunately, no. Let's take the Democratic Republic of Congo as an example.
Okay.
They have massive reserves of cobalt, a critical mineral for all sorts of modern technology.
Right.
China has secured access to a large portion of those mines. Now, on the surface, this might seem like a straightforward business transaction.
But I'm sensing there's more to this story.
There are serious concerns about the conditions in these mining operations.
Like what?
Issues like labor exploitation, environmental damage, and a lack of transparency have been raised.
So it's not just about China extracting these resources. It's about how they're doing it and the impact it's having on the local communities and the environment.
Precisely. And this raises important questions about China's commitment to sustainable development and ethical business practices.
Right.
This isn't just about China, it's about a global responsibility to ensure that development and progress don't come at the expense of people or the planet.
So it seems like there's a complex pattern emerging here. While China presents itself as a partner for development, there are some concerns about their methods and their ultimate goals.
It's a delicate balance. Developing nations are eager for investment and development, but they also need to protect their sovereignty and their long-term interests. And that's the dilemma we need to explore further.
Okay, so we've seen how this is playing out in Asia and Africa, but China's activities extend far beyond those regions, don't they?
Absolutely. China's global strategy is far-reaching and complex.
Right.
To truly grasp its implications, we need to look at the bigger picture, their activities across the globe, and how other world powers are responding to their rise.
Well, it sounds like we have a lot more to uncover. This has been a fascinating start to our deep dive, and I'm eager to see where it takes us next.
Yeah, me too. Welcome back to our deep dive into China's global ambitions. We've already seen how China's engagement in Asia and Africa has raised questions about their motives and the potential risks for developing nations. But they're not stopping there.
You're right, China's playing on a global scale, so where else are they making their presence known?
Let's shift our focus to Latin America,
Okay,
a region that's historically been considered to be within the United States' sphere of influence.
right.
China is making significant inroads there,
Okay.
challenging the traditional dynamics of power in the region.
That's interesting. It's like they're setting up shop right in the U.S.'s backyard.
Right.
So how are they doing it? What's their strategy in Latin America?
It's a familiar playbook, really. They're
Okay.
focusing on economic engagement,
Okay,
becoming major trading partners with many Latin American countries,
right.
and investing heavily in infrastructure mining and agriculture.
Okay.
Think massive loans, large-scale infrastructure projects,
Wow.
and access to those countries' valuable resources.
Okay, I see the pattern, but why Latin America? What's the draw for China?
Well, Latin America is incredibly rich in natural resources.
Okay,
Things like oil, copper, soybeans,
right.
all crucial for fueling China's booming economy.
Yeah,
It's about securing access to those resources for their continued growth.
that makes sense, but isn't there also a geopolitical element to this? You mentioned that this is a region where the U.S. has traditionally held a lot of sway.
Absolutely. China's increasing presence in Latin America is definitely a way for them to project their power on the world stage.
Right.
It's a signal that they're a global force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to challenge the existing power structures.
So it's not just about the resources, it's about sending a message and potentially shifting the balance of power on a global scale.
Precisely, and it's creating some tension.
Right.
The U.S. isn't exactly thrilled about China's growing influence in what they've long considered their backyard.
I bet it sounds like this is turning into a bit of a global chess match,
Mm-hmm.
with the U.S. and China making strategic moves to increase their influence around the world.
You could say that we're living in a multipolar world now,
Right.
where the old rules of the game no longer apply.
Right.
The balance of power is shifting, and it's creating uncertainty
Yeah,
and a sense that we're in uncharted territory.
that's a good way to put it. It's uncharted territory, and it makes you wonder, what's the end game here? What is China's ultimate goal with all of these moves?
That's a question many people are asking.
Yeah.
China's stated goal is to create what they call a community of shared destiny for mankind.
Okay, that sounds nice, but what does that really mean in practical terms?
That's open to interpretation.
Right.
Some see it as a genuine desire to promote cooperation and development on a global scale,
Hmm.
while others see it as a more strategic maneuver, a way for China to position itself as the dominant global superpower.
So it's a bit ambiguous, and that ambiguity combined with their rapid rise makes it all the more intriguing, even a bit unsettling.
It's definitely a mixed bag.
Right.
There's the potential for benefits, particularly for developing nations seeking investment in infrastructure,
Yeah.
but there are also significant risks, as we've discussed.
Right.
It all comes down to finding the right balance and carefully considering the long-term implications of these engagements.
Right. So we've got these massive economic projects, a potential shift in the global balance of power, but there's another dimension to China's rise that we need to talk about: their military. I've been reading about their rapid military modernization and their increasing assertiveness, particularly when it comes to territorial claims.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
This is another piece of the puzzle that's causing concern for many countries.
Hmm.
Think of their activities in the South China Sea, for example, building artificial islands and deploying military assets.
That's what I was thinking of. It seems pretty clear they're not shying away from flexing their military muscle.
It's a prime example of their growing military power and a signal that they're willing to challenge the existing regional order,
Right.
even if it creates tension with their neighbors and, of course, the United States.
So it's not just about economic and diplomatic influence, it's about hard power as well.
Right.
They're willing to use all the tools at their disposal to achieve their goal.
Exactly. And that raises the stakes significantly.
Right.
We're not just talking about economic competition or geopolitical rivalry anymore.
Yeah.
We're also talking about the potential for military conflict.
Okay, this is getting pretty serious. We've got economic competition, geopolitical rivalry, and now a potential military buildup. It all feels a bit overwhelming, to be honest. Where do we go from here? What does all of this mean for the average person?
I understand it's a lot to take in,
Yeah.
and it's easy to get caught up in the headlines and the anxieties about what the future holds.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that we all have a role to play in shaping that future.
You're right. So what can we do? How can we navigate this complex and rapidly evolving world?
Well, I think the first step is to stay informed.
Okay.
It's crucial to understand the dynamics at play, the potential risks and opportunities, and the different perspectives on China's rise.
Right.
Avoid getting swept up in simplistic narratives or fear-mongering.
Mm-hmm.
Look for nuanced and informed analyses, and be willing to engage in thoughtful dialogue and debate.
That's good advice. I think it's easy to fall into those traps,
Yeah,
to see things as black and white, good guys versus bad guys.
right.
But the reality is much more complex.
It is, and it's important to avoid demonizing entire countries or peoples.
Yeah.
There are real concerns about some of China's actions.
Right.
But we should also acknowledge their contributions to global development and seek ways to cooperate on shared challenges.
So it's about finding that balance, that nuanced understanding of the situation. It's not just about reacting to China's rise, but about actively shaping the kind of world we want to live in.
Exactly. We have agency and we need to use it.
Right.
We can support policies that promote cooperation, fairness, and sustainability,
Right.
and we can hold our own leader accountable for upholding democratic values and human rights.
Right.
These are global issues that affect us all, and we need to work together to find solutions.
Well, that's a good reminder. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of these global shifts, but we can make a difference. This has been an incredibly informative and thought-provoking discussion,
I'm glad.
and it's really helped me to see the bigger picture and understand the complexity of China's rise.
Good.
We could probably do like 10 more episodes on this.
Absolutely. There's so much more we could talk about.
Yeah. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into China's global ambitions. We've covered a lot of ground, from those massive infrastructure projects in Asia and Africa to their growing influence in Latin America. And we've talked about the economic and geopolitical implications of their rise, even touching on their military expansion.
We've really explored the multifaceted nature of China's actions on the world stage. It's a complex and rapidly changing landscape, and it's easy to get lost in the sheer scale of it all.
Yeah, you're right. It can feel overwhelming. But in this last part, I want to bring it back to a more personal level. What does all of this mean for us, for everyday people? How does China's rise actually affect our lives?
That's a crucial question. These global power plays and geopolitical shifts might seem abstract, but they have very real consequences for all of us. Let's start with the economic implications. China's become such a dominant player in the global economy.
Right.
And that affects everything from the prices we pay for goods and services to the availability of jobs.
Okay. I see that we're all consumers in this globalized world, and China's manufacturing power has definitely brought us a lot of affordable products. But I also know there's been a lot of talk about job losses in certain sectors as manufacturing has shifted to China.
Exactly. It's a double-edged sword. China's rise has created both opportunities and challenges for the global economy. On the one hand, it's brought cheaper goods and opened up new markets for businesses. But on the other hand, it's led to those job losses you mentioned, and there are concerns about unfair competition and even the environmental impact of their rapid industrial growth.
Right, there's that whole debate about whether their economic practices are sustainable in the long run, both for the planet and for workers.
Exactly. And beyond those immediate economic impacts, there are broader political and social ramifications to consider. Remember how we talked about China's model of governance, their more authoritarian and state-centric approach?
Yeah, and how that contrasts with the democratic values of many Western countries. It seems like that difference is creating some friction, especially as China's influence grows.
It definitely is. There are growing concerns about China's stance on issues like freedom of speech, human rights, and the rule of law. And as they become more powerful, these concerns are only going to intensify.
Yeah, I've been reading about those concerns in relation to their actions in Hong Kong and their treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. It's a reminder that China's rise isn't just an economic or political story, it's also a story about values ideology and the potential clash between those differing worldviews.
You've hit the nail on the head, and it raises questions about what kind of world order we're moving towards. Will it be a world where different models of governance can coexist peacefully, or are we heading towards a more fractured and divided world?
Those are big questions and honestly a bit daunting to think about. So where do we go from here? What can we do as individuals, as citizens, to navigate this increasingly complex world?
Well, I think it starts with acknowledging the complexity and resisting those simplistic narratives that often dominate the conversation. We need to be informed to seek out diverse perspectives and to engage in thoughtful dialogue and debate. It's easy to slip into fear or denial, but what's needed is a nuanced understanding of the challenges and opportunities that China's rise presents.
I like that embracing the complexity instead of shying away from it. It's about staying engaged, being informed, and recognizing that we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
Exactly. We can support policies that promote cooperation and sustainability and hold our leaders accountable for upholding human rights and democratic values. This isn't just about China, it's about building a better world for everyone.
Well said. I think that's a powerful message to end on. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, explored the complexities of China's global ambitions, and grappled with the implications for the future. But most importantly, we've emphasized the need for informed engagement and a commitment to shaping a world we can all be proud of.
That's been the goal of this deep dive. It's about understanding the challenges, yes, but also about empowering ourselves to act, to make a difference, and to contribute to a more just and sustainable future.
Thanks for joining us for this fascinating exploration. I hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep engaging with these important issues.